Our mentor for the morning is Tim Sheehy, the past president. As long as I've been here, I've been saying, this guy is the big guy. No more. We're still glad to have you here, the Metro Milwaukee Association of Commerce. We're going to talk a little bit about his career, leadership, and thoughts and ideas for all of us as we still continue to figure out what we want to do, where we're going, and shaping our lives and our career. He's kind of done some of that a little bit, so he'll be able to give us insight. So your mentor for the morning, Tim Sheehy. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Corey Joe.
Great to be here. Okay. All right, so let's start at today.
Yep.
I always think about, I've been here for 15 years, as you know. Tim was one of the people that interviewed me 15 years ago, and I Googled something about him, and he's one of the most influential people. Like, I was very intimidated. I was also a little intimidated on the MMAC website when I was starting to learn about what a chamber is, because I didn't know before this. When you think about the work of the chamber and the vast work of economic development and everything that goes into it, how do you think about that? How do you describe it?
I think about this, really simply in the way that a company would think about its business. So our business is Southeastern Wisconsin or Metro Milwaukee. And what we're really in business to do is to make this region globally competitive and make sure that we have high value jobs that support a vibrant quality of life for all. So if you think about it, if we're going to be successful doing that, we have to look at the region's balance sheet. We want to make sure that we reduce the liabilities and improve the assets. And we have the capability of doing this for the long run. We're not elected every 2 years. We don't have to worry about a lot of outside influences. We've been doing this since 1861. So we have the ability to kind of play the long game and think about what is it that we can do as a business community to improve this place, to invest capital and create jobs and do it over the long haul. And so that's really what makes this organization unique.
I think too, when we now we think about your career and the work that you've been doing here, a lot of people see you in this space as always the president. Like, most people met you when you were in that space. Where did your first interactions with MMAC start? Where did you start inside of this organization?
Yeah, I'm going to start to sound like a dinosaur answering these questions. My first interaction with MMAC was 40 years ago when I came here to interview for a job. And I totally understand that this is not in anybody's mind, probably sitting in this room, that your career path is going to be 40 years with the same organization. And I didn't think it was going to be mine, but it turned out that way. I had good opportunities. It was a way for me to learn on a broad spectrum of issues. I love the product, the region. I grew up here, and it just kind of matriculated that way. And, here I am today.
What was the first job? What was that job that you?
I came here to lobby for the association.
Yeah.
In governmental affairs. I moved back here from Washington, D.C. So, as I think about the answer to that question, though, and I look back at this long arc of 40 years, and I think about the session we're sitting in today here, and we've got a vibrant, small audience here, and we have a huge audience online. And so what struck me thinking about this today was, in the 40 years that I've worked here, I've kind of had a rigor and a routine of coming to work. And some of you aren't 40 years old. But if you look at this and I think back on it, every day I came to work here, I came usually early in the morning and I stayed till the afternoon. I didn't even have a fantasy of what hybrid work was like or what remote work was like, right? Remote work to me was, Saturday and Sunday on the weekend. Yeah. But you came to work every day. I'm sitting up here. I wore a tie for 40 years, every day. I put this piece of cloth on, knotted it up, buttoned it up, and went to work. I commuted every day to work. The routines were just inseparable from you as a person. And I did this religiously every day for 40 years. And then I think about, because we've all been through it, COVID hit. And to me, I think about the dinosaurs and their WTF moment when an asteroid hit. And they're all of a sudden, this is a whole new world. And some of us are going to thrive. Some of us are not going to survive. But evolution like that changed. And so I think about us sitting here in this room, and we've all experienced, COVID. And I'm not talking about the personal tragedies, the health scare, all those things went with it. But what really happened to the routines that some of us have been engaged in for our entire lives, and some of you were engaged in for most of your working life. And all of a sudden, overnight, all of that changes, right? All of a sudden, there's this acceleration of evolution. No longer do you have to come to work every day in person. No longer are people wearing ties everywhere. Your routines of travel, how you live at home, how you interact with your coworkers, how you interact with other people in your life, that changed like that. There was no slow evolution of it. It just hit us overnight. And so I think about everybody here who has a longer runway in their career than I do now. And I wonder and worry about how you're going to navigate this world and how you're going to shape this world. And that's there. Maybe there's some lessons from the past, but I think about you all going forward. And, I think about your work here over 15 years and the opportunity, hopefully, to be a decent mentor. But I don't know what that looks like, or I know what it looks like, but it's much more challenging in an environment where you may not be here and I can't walk by your office and see you. And again, it's the dinosaur talking. That's a little frustrating, but I worry about how that mentoring is going to transfer itself if people physically aren't present. I worry about how disconnected we become as people when we're not like the movie Home Alone, but we're home alone and we have all these communication channels, ChatGPT, social media, all these things that can put us into lanes. And so I have some thoughts as we go forward about my concerns about the downside of this, but there are also some tremendous advantages. And flexibility in working was one of those. And it's also accelerated, I think, the use of technology. You're going to talk with Nick tonight about ChatGPT. I think there's been this confluence of COVID and the uptake of technology that allows us to do all sorts of things that we couldn't do unless we were working together. But I have some huge concerns and some really positive thoughts about where this might go in the future.
Yeah, I think we can go there right now because I think this week is the first time I really feel myself feeling conflict about like the new way of the world. I think initially I was really excited about it. I think about some of the relationships. So like when we were all virtual and we're having meetings inside our homes, is a lot of ways I feel like I felt closer to our staff that I've known for years because now I can see like their dog and they could see that my Christmas tree was still up in March. And like as I was walking past my laptop, just like, yeah, Christmas tree still up. And we put shamrocks on it. Like we learned a lot of things. You had a routine, COVID, it's like, damn, it's fun. I just felt like I could see all these different facets of all of you. And I was excited about it. And I was excited about, I can just log in and I can hop on a call and I can throw in a load of laundry and I can do, it just felt like, this is great. And then this week happened and I started to say, I don't know if I want this. So like, I feel hopeful. And then also I do wonder about like the connections, like what are your thoughts?
I think we all, whether we recognize it or not, subconsciously, every interaction we have, we're making it a deposit or a withdrawal from an emotional bank account, right? And you don't think about it, but you're running around in your own mind, with this emotional bank account, and we have an interaction, and there's often an exchange, and I've either made a deposit in that or I've made a withdrawal, right? I think about it, I've made somebody laugh or I've upset them. Or I've given you advice or you've taken something from me. So we have this emotional bank account that we balance. And as you go forward in this hybrid work environment, it's a much different, it's much different in terms of how you manage that. And again, I've spent an entire career managing people face to face, interacting with them on a daily basis, going to receptions, going to chicken dinners, going to cocktail parties. And I have this whole persona built around those exchanges individually. And now again, overnight, we transfer a lot of that to online. And I think the first part of, COVID, and I think we're still in the first part about it, it's easier to manage that relationship if I've known Kathy for 20 years and we have this exchange. But if I don't, if I'm picking on Chantel here, if we just met, how do you manage that relationship online? And I think about this, my daughter's my oldest child, and she's worked for Microsoft, and she's now working for another software as a service company. And she'll often ask me for advice because she's managing people. And I said, honestly, this is the first time in my life, I'm not sure I can give you any good advice. She's managing a team of people she's never met. She's hired them all virtually. They live in different parts of the country, and she doesn't go to an office to work every day. I'm not sure I know how to navigate that. I'm sure there are some rules that transfer over. So I think about you all, and you're going to start to write the book about how you deal with this. And there are some lessons you can pull from the past, and there are some new rules that are going to have to be written about how you do this and how you develop these relationships. But one thing that keeps me up every night is I worry about the fabric of our community. I worry about the fabric of the country when we're so disparate in terms of the ways in which we can communicate without physically being in contact with one another, and about being able to exchange, views back and forth. And I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but a lot of the work that we do as an organization is very public. Like, we take positions, controversial positions that we think are in the best interests of the business community that will improve this region. And that doesn't mean we're right. It just, that's our opinion. So we put those out on the radio, on TV. I'm talking very publicly. And the history has been, pushback, exchange, but it's been much more civil. And since, you have all these opportunities online to do things, and people don't even have to communicate with you from their real persona, right? They're hidden. I watch how nasty, how volatile these exchanges come, how judgmental people are. And that concerns me. And it's much easier to do that in anonymity online than it is in a face-to-face exchange. And so, I don't know where I'm going with that, but what concerns me.
That makes me think about, this is a story that, when you talk about you being a mentor to me, and because of the pace that you have worked at, I don't think we've had we're going to sit down and do an hour mentor. But, if I've ever been frantic about, this article came out and I didn't mean this and this, whatever it was, if I was worried about it, concerned, you would always be there to offer me advice or give me a different way to look at it, or, okay, this is what you do after the fact. Invaluable. But a lot of what I've taken from you is just observing you in the space.
Yeah.
And I think about this meeting we were in together one time, and I was in the meeting and I was getting so upset about this person was saying something, and I was getting so upset. And I was gearing up, getting ready to go and tell this person, I'm about to let you know how it really is. And I just feel myself getting, I was about to go, and something said, look at Tim, watch what Tim is doing. And I looked over and you were just just cool, no reaction, no response. And in the environment, it felt hostile to me. And I was I'm so upset. But your reaction was so neutral. And then you responded and said whatever, it was very reasonable. But as soon as I saw you, I calmed down and I said, do what he's doing. Do what he's doing. And I never stopped doing that. Every time I get upset in a meeting now, or what I would have normally done, a lot of times I do think, what would Tim do in this moment? In this kind of environment,
yeah,
there are controversial decisions, and even though people are a little more rude now, this work has always been one with lots of passion, lots of opinions, and opposition. How did you develop that way of being, how has it been beneficial to you?
Yeah, I know it's something I learned a long time ago. If you take everything personally and you let somebody else's words control you, then you're out of control, right? And so if somebody says something to you that's offensive, and I'm not saying you sit there and take it, but I'm just saying if people can push your buttons that easy and everything is personal to you, even when it may not be, then you're out of control. Somebody else has control of you. And I never wanted to be out of control. So I always tried to listen, even if I didn't agree or it wasn't said in the right way or it was maybe offensive, and not let that control me, and think about my response and try to respond in a factual, professional way. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt inside or you're not you don't have a personality. But I just think that was, you end up going through life like a pinball, and everything somebody says to you has an impact on you personally, and you think about it, then they're controlling you. And I never liked that. And so that was, that's at least the way I thought about approaching it.
I mean, if you've managed to be in rooms. I mean, every politician, all the mayors, legislators, CEOs. I mean, sometimes when I'm in our board meetings with all these, like, really in my mind, these are such important people, I'm like a sweat a little bit thinking about it. Have you always been so like cool dealing with people? Have you, like, is that something that you developed over time? What is your way of thinking about it? So it's not weird.
It's a little bit like the duck, right? The legs are going crazy underwater, but you never see it. And he's just gliding across the surface. And I remember just make a short answer to this. I remember the first TV interview I did. And thank God I wore a dark blue sport coat because I was soaked. I was so nervous underneath. But and then with everything else, like everything else, you build experience around it. But I'm going back to this controlling question, and I would say this if you were standing here in this room, and he was a mayor before most of you were in the city, but John Norquist was I thought a great mayor, but extremely volatile. And he would be F-bombing me from this far away about something we did, just in my face.
Oh, wow.
And, I would just sit there and try to listen and not respond. And so, like I said, over time, I would have a hell of a day if every time somebody screamed at me or yelled at me or said something I didn't like or approached a certain way, I think I would have lost control. So maybe it's a defensive mechanism, but I also think it's a pretty decent way to run your life. Then you're in control of it.
I learned it. I'm still, inside, I'm still like, yeah. But I don't do it. But I would have done something too much.
And I can always hear my mom's voice in the back of my head. Timothy, if you don't have something nice to say about somebody, then don't say anything at all.
What did your mother say you were like as a kid? Like, what kind of person were you when you were little?
Boy, I don't know. I don't know what she would say. Nice kid. She put a ball in my hand. I was fine all day.
Yes.
So I don't know. A slow learner. Sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
how do you best learn?
No, I had a really difficult time reading as a kid.
Okay.
And she saw that and put me in a Cardinal Stritch. They still have it. They have a reading specialty class. I hated it. Everybody else is out playing and I'm sitting there in the summer day going through words.
And you read a lot.
I read a lot now. It's one of my favorite things to do.
How much do you think, how much are you reading today? How much of your day is you like reading?
Well, I think that two things that come to mind from reading. One is Warren Buffett's partner, one of the most successful investors ever, Charlie Munger. When he passed away, they put all these statements out from Charlie. One of the things Charlie said was, I always try to understand somebody else's argument against mine better than they do. And the way you get to do that is to have a really broad perspective on things. The other thing, I'm going to come back around your reading question. The other thing I've learned working for a lot of CEOs of very large companies is I always thought that the mentoring opportunity to learn from these CEOs was how they made decisions and how they made the best decisions. And I realized early on that I kind of missed the mark. There's a CEO that I've become very close to. And I've traveled a lot with him, and he always has this really huge briefcase and, just full of stuff to read. And I was joking with him one time when we were on his plane, and I said, "Oh, I bet you have all the answers in there." And he goes, "I don't have any answers in here, but what I have is the ability to develop the best questions. Because if you want to be a leader, it's not that you're going to have the best answers, but you're going to have the best questions. And the only way you can develop the best questions, I think, is to learn. And it's easy to say be a lifelong learner, and people can do it now on their iPods and podcasts and all sorts of other ways to absorb information. I'm a little old school. Mine is to read. So I will have a book on my bedside table. I just finished a really good autobiography on Elon Musk. And not that I think he's right, but it was fascinating to see how he made decisions, what he did. And then right next to it is a book about how the Allies facilitated the theft of art from the Jewish community with the Nazis. And I'm like, I didn't even know that was a real thing. I mean, I knew the theft of art was a real thing, but I had no idea that all these neutral countries helped facilitate it. That's fascinating. So you have just this wide range of information that you can absorb to give yourself the most important thing that you can have, which is perspective. And if you have a broad perspective, it allows you to ask really good questions. And if you ask really good questions, you're going to get really good answers and you're going to make really good decisions.
Tell us about some of the work that you've done here. And as 30 years as president, in the marketing for this, I talk about the big things, and most of them were things that happened while I was here. So I know a lot of it I didn't even see or know about. What are some of the things that you've enjoyed most, have been the most interesting, most challenging, most rewarding?
Yeah, I mean, internal and external. Internal, the most rewarding thing to me is to see people in this organization grow and realize their own kind of personal dreams and kind of exceed maybe what they thought they could do as a professional. I mean, that's really exciting. The downside of that is we've lost some really great people who have gone on to run really good organizations in this community. But this is not like a jar with a lid on it where you can't leave. So that's been, and then the other side of it, I think, is been for me a 40-year struggle and challenge to make sure that the citizens in this community have the ability to realize their potential. And you hear companies today talk about it because we're, living in this demographic shortage here. The working age population in southeastern Wisconsin grows by less than 1% between now and 2040. My generation, unfortunately, this year, I will be part of the largest generation in U.S. history turning 65. So more people will turn 65, 10,000 a day. I think it's 10 or 12,000 a day, turn 65 this year. So we have this huge demographic movement. It's almost like the pig and the python, right? Moving through. And so all these people turning 65 and starting to move into that part of their life. And we have far fewer people coming in. As a matter of fact, if you look over the last 13 years, Metro Milwaukee has only added a net about 3,000 people. So we have this very slow growth. So there's a great opportunity for people coming in to realize not only a job, but a career path, because there's a lot of people moving out on the top of this, right? So great opportunity here. But at the same time, I look at, over 100,000 K-12 students in the city of Milwaukee, and 1 in 5 are doing their math and reading at grade level. I look at African-American students in the city of Milwaukee. 1 in 10 are doing math and reading at grade level. Hispanic students, 1 in 7. And so I can look at this through a very calculated lens of our job is to make sure that companies here have a pool of talent that they can draw from. And so that's a very cold clinical calculation. We're not producing the talent that these companies are going to need to draw from. So that's an economic threat. But then I look at it as a citizen of the community here. And if we have all these young people in this instance who aren't realizing their capability, what does it mean to the community? What does it mean to them individually? So we've spent a long time as an organization. I spent a lot of time personally in my career trying to figure out how to improve the delivery of K-12 education to help these students get to the point where they can realize their dream, whether that's going right into the workforce, going to a 2-year institution, or going into a 4-year institution. And it's a cocktail hour conversation, but it's very challenging because these young people are coming from home environments that are very challenging. They're living in neighborhoods that have lots of threats to them, we have to do what we can as a community to figure out how to make this work. Not only for the economics, but for the prosperity of the people that grow up and live here. So, there are lots of things that we've done over time in that, almost a $20 million scholarship program to put kids from high school who can't afford to go to college into 2-year and 4-year institutions here. Very controversial effort to give parents, especially poor parents, the ability to take public resources and go to a public school, to go to a private school, or go to an independent charter school. Lots of things that we've done. I'm not saying they're all right, but they've all been driven by the quest to make sure that people in this community have the ability to realize their potential.
So I'm gonna start opening it up for questions. So encourage people to drop the questions and be thinking about your questions in this room too. As we get to that place, I'll let you know. So I want to wrap up my part of this. And there's so many things I want to ask you. We just don't have the time. But as you've been reflecting obviously over your career and thinking about what you're going to do next. How did you decide that it was time to shift gears and move on to something different? And what does that look like? What do you think is going to look like for you?
This may sound, it's going to sound honest because it is. I was not and never have been a big career planner. I never sat down on Sunday and said, oh boy, in 5 years, this is what I want to do. In 10 years, this is what I want to do. I'm sure that was somewhere in my mind, but I was just big on execution. I run into so many people, and you probably have. The pizza's coming at 5. I'm going to get you this piece of work on Tuesday. You would be amazed at the number of people who don't execute. They tell you something, you're nodding your head. It could be personally, could be professionally, but people tell you they're going to do something or something's going to happen and it doesn't happen. And I don't know, I just built my career by making sure that I did everything I said I was going to do, that I was true to that as best as I could. And that if I did that really well, the things that I couldn't control would start to take care of themselves. And so I really didn't sit here and say, boy, one day I want to be, the head of the chamber. And when I came here, I thought, I want to be here for 2 years, get some experience, go back to DC. Obviously, it didn't turn out that way. So I wouldn't have been a very good career planner. But I was never one big on thinking about this. Now, when I saw opportunities, I wanted to make sure I was prepared for them. And the best way to do that was go out and do your work, think ahead about your work, do what you say you're going to do. And those really simple things help, I think, accelerate you to the point where there is an opportunity, you're prepared, ready, and you've got a track record to show somebody that you can do that. So and I say when you get to the point, I don't know, I felt like it was time. you don't die at 65. I hope not. But I just felt it was time that I should move on and do other things. I didn't sit here and think, boy, it's 5 years, it's 3 years, it's 2 years, it's one, and I'm out. But it just kind of happened, and I'm going through the next phase of life in the same way. What am I going to do this year? Let's see how it works out. I don't say in 5 years I'm going to be here and this is going to happen. I don't have that much control over my life.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I knew you were leaving, I got really sad. And but as the transition has taken place and like Dale is in place, it's like really interesting watching his evolution and just seeing how when we move into a different space, it makes someone else expand. And you were like watching all of us do that in this organization. What are your thoughts about that, obviously, inside of MMAC, but like about in this room, in our community, all these people online, the future leaders that are going to be like doing the things now that you have been doing for the last 30 years?
I don't know how many of you heard this statement made. Life is tough, wear a helmet. Right? People used to tell me that all the time. And as I started to think about it, I said, okay, life is tough. You can wear a helmet. But if we're going to stay with that analogy, the most important thing is find people that you can put in your foxhole with you, right? Whether that's personally or professionally, because life is tough. And so you want a foxhole of people that you can really count on. Friends, colleagues, coworkers, family, because that gets you through a lot of things. And so I never sit here and think, boy, I did this all myself. I think I was really intentional about relationships and investing in those relationships. And so when something happened or there was a challenge or I needed support, I had people in the foxhole, and you don't need 400 of them. My grandfather used to tell me when I was way too young to understand what the hell he was talking about. He said, when you die, and I'm thinking, oh, Grandpa, I'm not going to die for a long time. But he said, when you die, you'll know you had a really good life if you can count on one hand your friends. And I used to think, crap, they got lots of friends. And now I know what he means. Those people that are really there for you, that won't judge you, and I think it's a great thing to, reflect on.
Is the word legacy, like, is that weird to think about your legacy? Like, I was like, what do you feel like your legacy should be? I'm like, is it weird to think of it that way, or do you think of it that way? Like what you've done and left for us too.
Yeah, I'm not going to equate myself in this analogy to the person I'm talking about. Again, I'm looking at the audience here, but Nolan Ryan is one of the greatest pitchers ever. Like 6 no-hitters, Hall of Fame, great pitcher. And I listened to him one time and somebody was interviewing him about his legacy. And he said, the first part of my career, people said, we've got to find another Nolan Ryan. He's really good. And the second part of my career was, what are we going to do when Nolan's gone? And he said, the third part of my career was, who's Nolan Ryan? So I really hope I aspire to the point where somebody says, who the hell is Tim Sheehy? That this organization has taken the next step, that Dale's been a great leader, that you all have done this. And my legacy is in the past somewhere. It's not, oh, I wish he was here. Oh, we need another. No, that would be the best thing that would make me it's going to sound odd, that would make me the most proud that this organization has continued beyond me, because it's not about me, it's about the organization. And it's about making sure that this baton pass is really clean and that the runner is off and gone. And the person who passed the baton is now run out of gas. They're sitting on the sidelines in the infield and the race goes on.
I'm going to pass the baton to you. Normally I wouldn't give as much time, I would ask more questions, but I just know you all can have a lot of questions. So I'm not gonna Asking questions. So questions in the room, we'll try to alternate. So let's start with the question in the room. And don't be that person, it's like waiting for somebody else to raise their, you know, you got a question, ask the question and then I'll alternate back and forth. So, Rob.
So look back over the past 40 years. What singular achievement what do you look back on and say that thing right there, that's what I'm most proud of? It's there.
I think it's a body of work, right? I think it's a body of work that's interrelated and I would be, it's like picking a favorite child, right? Now my daughter thinks she's mine, but she's not listening. So, but I think it's a body of work that is so interconnected, that one kind of standout thing relates to another that I sorry, I don't have an answer as to there's that one thing. I guess I just reflect back on whatever those decisions were, whatever those results were, is the fact that you can have an impact. I mean, no matter what you're doing, you can have an impact and never lose sight of that.
Be it checked.
With a focus on execution, did it help you to say no and draw boundaries when you needed to? And can you give an example of that?
Boy, that's a great question. Somebody once told me, if you're working out of your inbox, you're working on somebody else's priorities. And I thought, oh, really interesting. So think of all the emails you get in a day, right? And you're solving somebody else's problem. And I realize part of our work is solving other people's problems. But if you don't prioritize those, then what you're doing, you're a pinball on a machine and you're just responding to all these things coming in. So it's really helpful to prioritize. I guess there are tools to do this. You know, again, I'm old school, but it's sitting down on Monday morning and writing out, what do I want to get done this week? Right? And Karen's nodding her head because she's probably really good at doing that because she has to be really good at doing it. But I think that's a simple tool to prioritize. Another way to do it is, as best you can, define times, maybe twice a week for a couple hours. There are no meetings. You're not going to respond to email and you're just going to think through that. So it's a really great question and a really insightful question in terms of if we say, you know, I say this to our board all the time because they come up with all these ideas for things we do. And my answer is, if I say yes too often, don't expect execution. Right? And go ahead.
As a follow-up question to that, do you have any suggestions on how to say no with conviction, but without burning a future opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, that's a great question too, but it's so dependent on the situation. You know, there are probably lots of ways to do that. I can think of ways that I interact with my spouse where that's going on both ways, right? I'm going to get to it. It's really important. You know, so there are, I mean, that's such a situational question. Another way I could think about this too is this, I think this is Thomas Edison. Vision without execution is hallucination, right? And nobody wants to work with somebody who hallucinates. So it's okay to have a vision, right? But then you got to go out and execute on
it. Okay. You know that the thing that people say about when you say no, like no is a full sentence. Is that, do you just say no or do you like explain why it's no?
You know, it's going to sound, so my answer is, I live life in a food chain, right? And sometimes I'm the shark and sometimes I'm the minnow. So my answer depends upon where I am in that food chain.
Okay.
Right? If you're asking me for budget to do something, I can say no. Hopefully I'll explain it, but I can say no. If a board member asks me to do something, I'm not going to say no. I'm going to figure out either how I get it done or figure out how I can't get it done that is going to make them upset that I didn't get it done. So it kind of depends who's asking me the question in terms of how I'm going to answer it. I mean, if it were one of my kids, no, end of sentence.
Right.
still works most of the time. No end of sentence to my board member does not,
It does not work.
does not work.
That's the realest thing we gonna hear today. Promise you, that is so true and it's real. Prashant?
So continue on the accountability piece, execution piece. You work with so many different stakeholders, right? Politicians, CEOs, board members, staff. How do you hold others accountable, especially people who are with a lot of authority, in leadership roles, to make sure that they do something in time for the community or for what beneficial for the
Yeah,
organization?
so it's a great question, and one of the most difficult things in my job, and one of the most difficult things for this organization is we control nothing, right? I don't control, despite what people think, I don't control any elected official, right? They're elected separately. They have a decision-making body and a decision-making authority. We have customers. I don't have any company that we own. So we have to influence everybody to make a decision. We can't require anybody to make a decision. I can't require anybody to join the organization. So it's really a world built around influence and understanding what's going to get you to make the decision or as close to the decision as I would like you to make without having any control over whether you make that decision or not. And very little repercussion, right? We're not an organization that goes out and says, well, if you don't vote like this, we're going to run a candidate against you. We don't operate like that. We're kind of the party of the incumbent. We're going to work with who's in office, Democrat or Republican. So we have to figure out a way to motivate and influence people over which we have no control. And there's a great lesson in that, because that's what you really want to be able to do with your coworkers, with your customers, is you don't want to have to go to the control thing, right? Corey Joe, you better get that done or no raise. I mean, nobody wants to work in that environment. Now, there's probably something subtly going through Corey Joe's mind saying, okay, yeah, I know what I have to do to get this done. But most of what we do is influencing people over which we have no control. So it's really, I'm a huge Ted Lasso fan. There's a great lesson in there about asking people questions and not judging them. And so getting people to talk, getting them to talk about what's important to them and try to find a way to get to their yes that gets what you want to get done. And again, a lot of situational dependent there, but it's if I think about it, it's how we work. Can't get a company to move here. We really don't control anything at the end of the day, but we've got to influence everything.
Recently decided on a deal to limit the university's DEI efforts. How do you think that the elimination of diversity programs at our universities and local companies is affecting the city and its potential to attract new, more diverse talent?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I don't work at the UW. I'll come back to that in a second, but a program that we've been involved in for the last 5 years is called the Region of Choice. And we looked at the facts here, and the facts are that Metro Milwaukee, if you're an African-American here or you're Hispanic here, compared to 20 other peer regions, your economic prosperity is at the bottom. Doesn't mean everybody is, but overall as a population. So we have a huge gap in the disparity here. And again, we don't control anything. So what we said was, what can we do to help change that dynamic? Because what I don't want people to do that are living here or thinking of moving here is to say, boy, my own demographics or my own skin color or my own ethnicity doesn't show up in Milwaukee. I won't be successful there, because you would look at those numbers and say, well, that's how it appears to me from the outside. So what we tried to do was to pull together companies in the region and get them to share best practices. So what are the best practices to make my workplace as attractive to the widest audience that I can? And then we did a really interesting survey with about 1,400 diverse managers. And we asked them the question about, would you recommend Milwaukee as a place to live? And would you recommend your company as a place to work? And we used this net promoter score to do this. The companies came out pretty well. The community did not. And so what I think about is from a corporate standpoint or a community standpoint, what do people view are the barriers to professional growth here, to living here, to feeling like they belong in the community? Not my view of it, but what are the people that live here? What are their views? And how do we go about addressing those views? And so I think about a companies doing the same thing. If I'm Rockwell, I don't want to be, I'm not going to be successful if I'm home only to white engineers, right? If that's my total pool to draw from, because that's who's working here, that's who's advancing here, and that's who's, being attracted here, I'm not going to be as successful. And especially given the demographics and the slow growth that we have as a population. So what do we do to make sure that those, the community and the company is doing the best job it can to make sure that it's a great place to work for all people? On the flip side now, when I look at the university, I graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I've looked at the statistic for 20 years, and I don't think the needle's moved. About 3 to 4% of the graduating class of UW-Madison is African-American. Oh, think about that. That's stunning. That's a very small pool for companies to hire from. So if I were UW-Madison, whether it's, you call it DEI or whatever it is, what I'd want to do is look at what are the barriers in this university that we can control that are limiting our ability to attract this diverse student population and graduate it, right? And there are some challenges, before kids get there, maybe they're not coming prepared, but what can I do in this institution? And that's where I would spend my time focused, whether that is, and again, we have a great tension, it seems to be recently in this country, is we take a word like diversity, equity, and inclusion, which shouldn't offend anybody, and make it offensive or turn it into some label or do something with it. So I don't want to get caught up in what you call it. I want to get caught up in how do we make sure that this institution is removing barriers that may be holding people back from advancing through this university, in this organization, in this community, or in a company.
Next question.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for your thoughts so far. I'm Carly with Mortensen Construction. You mentioned the startling fact of how many people will be retiring, I think, in this year, like 10,000 a day or something. How would you encourage aspiring leaders to start to move into those type of roles? Or what thoughts and advice would you give for that?
Yeah, really good question. What I would do, and again, it's going to sound a little old school, but I try to be as present in as many of those interactions as you can, where you're seeing somebody who might have a job that you aspire to, or who might be a good career guide for you, is to be present in those. So you can see those interactions and to find, thoughtful ways to ask questions of them so you can understand how they think. When I got this job, I always thought that, and I've been through this in terms of being in a position where you're prepared to ask really good questions, right? And so you want to do that as you go. But I also have hopefully communicated to everybody here is, don't bring me a problem, bring me a decision to make. And everybody that works here has heard this 100 times. And by that, I mean, when somebody comes into me and says, what I want them to do is come in and say, I think we should do this, and here's why we should do this. Now I have a decision to make, versus coming in and saying, well, I have this customer, they're really upset about this, we didn't deliver this, and I think we need to figure this out to do. Okay, what I have now is a problem, right? You just put a problem in my lap. And the people that keep putting problems in my lap, that's a red flag. But if somebody comes to me and says, this customer, we had this issue with them, or this member of ours, they're really upset. Here's what I think we should do, and here's why I think we should do it. I have a decision to make. And decisions are really easy to make. problems are really difficult to solve. But what it also gives me insight into is how you think, how you address that problem, and what your capabilities are in addressing that. And I start to clock that now in my head. Really good thought process. And then I can start to give you much more valuable input and advice. Because I can see how you think, I see where maybe some of the gaps are, where experience I have had, or whoever you're working for has had, they can plug that in. And I, you know, that's and if you keep doing that, then I don't worry about it, right? That next opportunity, when it happens, you're there, you're prepared, and you've been creating an opportunity for people to make decisions. And then you're going to be a good decision maker.
What will Milwaukee look like in 5 years, and how important is MMAC's impact on that evolution?
Well, I'm hopeful that our impact is extremely relevant. As I said, we've been around since 1861, and when I took over, somebody gave me really good advice: don't screw it up. And so I believe that we'll continue to be impactful. And I also believe this, that we can get in a room like this and people can walk out, and this is another life lesson. It's somebody else's problem. This also goes to prioritization. You can't take on everything, but you walk out and too often everybody says, well, that's somebody else's problem. They're going to solve it. This community in 5 years is going to look like the citizens of this community want it to look like, and the time they're willing to put in to do it, and the decisions that they're willing to commit to. That's what this community is going to look like. So I don't know, but I have a lot of confidence that it's going to look better than it is today. But I also have a huge concern that we continue to find ways to give people an opportunity to achieve their potential. That doesn't mean everybody's going to achieve the same potential, but we have to find ways to remove the barriers that are in the way of giving people as individuals the opportunity to achieve their potential, however they see that. And the communities that do that, the communities that are going to flourish and are going to be attractive. And the most attractive community to a company right now are those communities that have removed those barriers, where the people that live there can achieve their potential. If I'm looking to move a company or expand a company somewhere, that's where I want to be, because the most important thing to me is that talent.
So I heard you say achieve potential. That kind of leads into my question. Shout out to Vanessa, who works for our Earn and Learn through the city of Milwaukee, right? So small businesses give opportunities to individuals that larger corporations normally wouldn't, right? So then when you say achieving potential, how do we instill in our youth how they can realize their potential?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, we have a program we've been running here for 15 years, and it's called Be the Spark. And it was a student who coined this phrase that I use describing it. I can't be what I can't see. So I think it's incumbent upon companies, and I think they're getting better at doing it, of giving young people the opportunity to see what's out there. And I'll give you a simple example. We did this with Southwest Airlines. We had a group of kids come, and a number of these kids in the city had never been to the lakefront, let alone the airport. They can't see being a pilot, they can't see being a stewardess, they can't see being a mechanic, they can't see being a baggage handler. Giving the opportunity to see, so that's, creating that opportunity, and then we have to make sure that they have the educational pathway to do it. But that's really important. And when we started the program, there wasn't a company in Milwaukee that would let a student on the floor of a manufacturing facility. And we kind of got that fixed. And now you can do that. So again, this is a learning lesson for companies too. You can't sit here and say, I've got 400 openings or 200 openings or 50 openings. I can't fill them. Okay. Where are you recruiting? What does your organization look like? What are you doing to get young people interested in the career, if not the company? And so, the more we do of that, the more we create opportunities, and the more people could see those opportunities.
Let's take one more quick one from the chat.
Do you believe you created an environment within the MMAC where people could be their authentic selves? And do you believe you make people feel comfortable enough to be honest with you?
I've gotten better over time. I think that comes with perspective, and a little maturity, and realizing that everybody else's career is as important to them as yours is to you. And so I'm not sure I was there when I started out. But hopefully I learned that over time from people that I work with. And, it's not a question for me to answer, but I'm hopeful that we have an environment where people can have honest interactions, that they don't take them personally, and that we're as invested in their success as they are. Now, do we get that right 5 days a week, 24 hours a day? No. But hopefully we get more of that right than we don't get right.
That's real leadership. Thank you. Actually, I'll answer that question from my own perspective. I remember having this quick conversation with Tim about fuel, which was like 80% white when I took over. So I was very conscious of not over blacking everything and turning, I'm like, I could turn this to a BT awards if I wanted to, but because my thinking was all about diversity. And I was like not seeing the diversity, and I was trying not to have a hyper reaction to that and hyper correct it. And I was overthinking it. We were talking one day and I just was telling him, and he said, if this is something that you're thinking about and it's bothering you and you're going to sleep worried about it, just go for it. Just do it. If this is something you're passionate about and you want to have a diversity focus, a diversity angle, do it. And I don't know, I didn't expect you to say that. I don't know what I thought you was gonna say, but I wasn't expecting you to just say, just try it. Cause I was afraid to make a mistake, or I was afraid to mess it up or overdo. But it really empowered me to be more creative and loose and authentic. And that's been my experience.
Yeah, but on the flip side, I think I've also learned a lot from you, Corey, Joe, and others in the organization. Because I think I came into this with, which I smile at now, with the defensive posture of, you go into a room, it's a reception we're having, and there are two people of color in the room, right? And I would always come out of that saying, I didn't do anything wrong. What? It's not my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. Rather than figuring out how do we be more intentional so that opportunity to be in that room changes. Maybe we're not, reaching out, maybe we're not broad enough in terms of how we're doing it. We're doing things differently. But I've heard over the years, a lot of our members as colleagues, and you get into this discussion, and it's a difficult one, right? But it's, I've learned that I was approaching it from the wrong standpoint. If my answer as a leader here was, I'm not doing anything wrong, was defensive, and it wasn't the way I would attack other problems, which is, this is an issue. What do we need to change? What aren't we doing? We aren't going to get to a better answer as a community.
Yes, absolutely. Well, MMAT is better for that advice that you just gave us. Fuel is all of us. Thank you so much, everyone. Tim Sheehy.
Thank you.